only Achimota that produces good things. So to all my friends, I say thank you for your support. But I would like to mention two specific friends. Dr. Phillips and his wife, Mrs. Reverend Phillips. Uncle Freddy, Sister Agi, if you are here, could you stand with him? You know, when we first got married, the first 3 months of our married life, as a newly appointed lecturer in this university, they gave us a room in their home, and they only had 2 bedrooms and a study. So they gave us 1 bedroom and put their children and the house help in the study for 3 months. And we will never forget that. Thank you, Uncle Freddy. And to all my teachers, I say thank you. Teachers all the way from Swedru Methodist School. I remember one particular teacher called Joe Pat, who took delight in me. Teachers from Christian Methodist Secondary School. I remember Mrs. Nimakon. During my O-level days, I went to her and I asked her, please, if I did summary exercises, would you mark them for me? She said yes. So every Sunday after church, I did 2 summary exercises. And the reason I did those exercises was because for those of you who did O-level English, summary was people's biggest challenge. And I said, I will not let summary overtake me. And that lady saw me through that. And teachers from St. Augustine's, University of Ghana, University of Oregon, I'm through a 4-year grant of teaching assistantship at a time when my own government didn't think it necessary to support somebody doing a PhD in linguistics. Mr. Chairman, it was August 1962. A young lady, 34 years, a single mother of 4 boys, the oldest 11, the youngest 5. Divorced 6 years earlier, she left home for work. She usually left home at dawn because she had to be at work early enough to prepare breakfast for the students of the local high school. That day, August 18th, 1962, was the last time her family saw her alive. Her partially decomposed body, having suffered from cutlass wounds, was found 2 days later, too decomposed to be brought home. A hurried burial had to be done. The killers never found her children left motherless. That woman worked as a cook at the Swedru Secondary School, and she was my mother. I, being her 3rd son, her main son. And today, as the son of Rachel Agri gives his inaugural lecture, marking his rise to the top of his career, and as we mark 50 years this year of her passing, in her memory, I established, Mr. Chairman, at the University of Ghana, the Rachel Agri Memorial Prize for the best graduating female student in the Bachelor of Arts program, with a seed money of 5,000 Ghana cedis. Mr. Vice Chancellor, in this envelope is a letter addressed to the registrar containing a check signed for 5,000 Ghana cedis for the establishment of that prize. And I intend that for the next 2 or 3 years, this initial amount will be increased to 10,000 Ghana cedis. Now, Mr. Chairman, let's talk about cocoa, cassava, and chocolate, and how you prepare a dish of cocoa, cassava, and chocolate, creating a dilemma for an African linguist. First, I want to say something about the love relationship between myself and linguistics and how it all started, how we met. It was December 1978, and the admissions list from the University of Ghana had been published in the newspapers, and that was what was done back then. So everybody saw your admission and what you had got. And I had been given English, linguistics, and Swahili. And my younger brother, being the teaser of the family, started calling me Swa. I was so sad. I was sad because, one, I had done English at sixth form and I didn't want it again, ever again in my life. And then I had been given Swahili. I knew it was a language spoken in some African countries. But what on earth was linguistics? I had absolutely no clue. But, so my dad said, well, it's up to you. Either you retake your A-levels or you go to Legon and take up the offer. And A-levels are the last exams anybody want to retake. So I decided to come to Legon to read English, linguistics, and Swahili. Ladies and gentlemen, by the end of my first year, I knew that linguistics and I had a long future ahead of us. I fell in love with that discipline because it was amazing looking at how languages worked and how human beings could manipulate language. So this is how we met. Now let me give you an overview of this presentation. I'm first going to talk about some of my theoretical orientations. Don't get too bored. And then I'll give some overview of some of my research. I won't spend too much time on that, and hopefully not too much technical detail, because I realize that with the exception of maybe about 5 to 10% of the crowd, not too many people are familiar with concepts in linguistics. In the third section, I'll express my views as an African linguist in relation to the kind of research we should be doing as African linguists. And this is where I'm going to serve you the meal made from cocoa, cassava, and chocolate. And in section 4, I'll express some thoughts on some policy issues as far as language issues in this country are concerned. My research has been informed by essentially an orientation in linguistics that has come to be known as functionalism or functional typological linguistics. This approach to linguistics in the main runs counter to the dominant approach which over the years, since about the late 50s, early 60s, has been championed by Chomsky. So I'll talk a little bit about functionalism. And then I also talk about prototype categorization, and the third concept will be grammaticalization. These three things have been very critical in my work as a linguist. So briefly, functionalism. Now, in functionalism, as you can see from the quotation on your screens, functionalists believe that the structure of language to a large extent, not every structure, but the structure of language to a large extent reflects what language is used for. So functionalists look at language as a tool. And like any tool, the design of the tool reflects the functions that the tool is used for. So take your kitchen knife. Your kitchen knife has a handle. And it has a handle because that is where you hold and apply pressure. Try and imagine a kitchen knife without a handle. We probably won't call it a kitchen knife. So that is the essential reasoning or philosophy of functionalism. So in general, functional grammars embrace what we might call the communicative imperative. The idea that linguistic form generally serves to code linguistic function, and that the shapes taken by linguistic form arise out of the demands of communicative interactions. That's a quotation from Tomlin, 1994. So broadly, that's functionalism. Now, prototype classification or categorization. This is an approach to looking at entities and the groupings of entities as championed by Elena Roche, but with philosophical backgrounds going back to a German philosopher, Wittgenstein. This approach contrasts the classical way that goes all the way back to Aristotle of looking at entities and the groupings of entities. So in the classical approach, entities are defined according to necessary and sufficient conditions. So to be a member of a group, there are certain conditions you must meet. And those conditions, once you meet them, are sufficient for you to be classified as a member of that group. Again, in the classical way of categorizing, features were supposed to be binary. In other words, you either have the feature or you didn't have the feature. Again, in the classical way of dividing up the world or grouping things, categories have clear boundaries. So you are either in that group or you are not. And the boundaries are very clear. It's almost like, well, actually, are there clear boundaries between men and women? Because there is also the third category, hermaphrodites, right? So if you're a human being, you're either male, female, or something in between, a very small percentage. And in the classical categorization approach, all members have equal status. Okay, so that's number 2, number 3, number 4. What do these 4 creatures have in common? You thought I was going to stand here and talk and you sit down and listen. No, I've not been teaching for a while, so I miss not teaching. So let's do a little interaction. What do these have in common? If you're asked to give one name, one label, birds. Okay, that's correct. Now, if you were asked to give the best example of this group, would you pick, which one would you pick? The one in the top right, well, to your right corner, right? Followed by who? The vulture? Are you sure? Which one would you pick after the sparrow? The vulture, the chicken, or the turkey? The chicken. Now, don't think of birds in terms of something you eat too. We are talking about birds as creatures, not something for food. So maybe you want to revise your opinion. So after the sparrow, some people are reluctant to pick the vulture. So the vulture followed by the chicken or the turkey. Hey, I hear some people are saying turkey. Why would you pick the turkey over the chicken? If you were showing one of as a good example of a bird. Okay, when did you last see a turkey fly? If you live in the villages, you find that chickens do fly sometimes. They would, especially chickens, the free-range ones, where they spend the night on trees, right? Now, so this is where the prototype approach to categorization comes in. These entities are all members of a category, but they are not the same. They don't have the same membership, but they are bound by family resemblances. And that's one of the ideas behind the prototype approach. There is also what is known as prototype effects. This means that certain members are more reflective of that category than others. So our little creature up there is obviously more reflective of that group more than the others. And prototype approach also recognizes that some categories have flexible boundaries in the sense that some entities can move out, some can come in. Now, these ideas have implications for language analysis, as I would show. So the next concept is grammaticalization. This is a very big term, but don't be confused and don't be scared. You know, in language we have big words, words that we classify as nouns, verbs, adjectives. Everybody knows that, right? Hopefully. If you went to Christian Method, you should know that. If you went to some other school, I don't know what you know. But there are also very small things, like personal pronouns, tense markers, etc., etc. The small ones we refer to as grammatical items. Now, grammaticalization says that there are ways in which every language develops some of those small items from some big ones. And I'll show you some examples in Akan. So, we have looked at three central issues in my research: functionalism, prototype classification, and grammaticalization. Now, in terms of the work I've done over the last 20-something years as a linguist, my research has covered areas that you would call the morphosyntax and semantics of Akan and other languages. I've also done work in discourse analysis based on Akan and other languages, especially English. I've also covered areas like grammatical relations. By that, we mean things, everybody knows subjects and objects, and indirect objects. Of course, I've argued in some papers that Akan doesn't have an indirect object, but I'm not going to bore you with the details. I've also looked at serialization and the interface between serialization and grammatical relations. I've also looked at complementation and verbal semantics, how the semantics of a verb determines the kind of sentences that you can use that verb in. I've also dealt with tense aspects in Akan, and I have shown in a number of places that Akan, strictly speaking, doesn't have a tense system, that what we have is more of an aspectual system. I've also looked at adjectives in Akan, and as a result of my work, I know some of my students have also done similar work in other languages. Of course, I've looked at instances of grammaticalization in Akan, and as I said earlier on, discourse analysis in Akan and English. Now, one of the studies I've done, and in fact, if you go to the university website, there is a news item there. The Director of Public Affairs, during the opening of the exhibition in the library, asked me, which is your best paper? I thought that was a very tough one to decide. But I said, this paper, a paper that looks at Akan as a language that possibly in the past had a noun class system. Now, briefly, if you know, how many of us know Swahili, or a little bit of Swahili? Raise your hand. Just a little bit of Swahili. Okay. Now, in a language like Swahili, or a lot of the languages we refer to as the Bantu languages, every noun comes with something sticking in front of it. What in linguistics we call prefix. And so you can tell the class a noun belongs to by the prefix it has. Now, if you look at Akan as we currently have it, you find that there is something similar. So you find words like onia, and you find a lot of nouns that start with o or o. So onia, sibling, onipa, person, oponko, horse, oba, woman. Abofra, anoma, India, nkura. Now, for some of the words, if you create the plural, you realize that you need to change that little thing in the front. So, dia is tree, singular. But to get the plural, you stick the n in front of it to give you India. In the Chi dialects, they will say India. Now, when I look closely at large tracts of data, I came to the conclusion that the older ancestor of Akan must have had a system almost like what the Bantu languages have. And so I talked about the defunct noun class system in Akan. But then I also go on to say that there is a new system developing. And as the Bible says, behold, I make all things new. So there is a new system developing, and that new system is developing along the plural system of the language. So you have Obenyin, this is Fanti, but the plural could be Imbenyin or Imbenyinfo. So there are some nouns that will have fo at the end, in addition to the plural marker in front. And my argument is that these nouns reflect a possible new direction in the development of the system. So this is one work I've done. I'm very proud of it because I know that it took me quite a lot of thinking to come up with that. I've also done work on adjectives. And following Dixon's work on adjectives, I have come to the conclusion that Akan adjectives can be classified into various semantic types. We have adjectives that mark dimension, as in where, adjectives that mark physical property, as in dur or heavy, adjectives that mark color. We have adjectives that mark human propensity, or if you like, human attitudes and behavior. We have adjectives that mark age, value, and speed. Now, there is also this issue of adjective sequencing. And as I said, I'm not going to stand here and let you sit there and just listen. So your next exercise is coming up. Are you ready? Okay. Look at these adjectives, especially the students here. It could come on your next exam, or you can never tell. So we have, these are English adjectives: beautiful, big, new, white. So we have a value adjective, which is beautiful, a dimension adjective, which is big, age adjective, new, and white is a color adjective. Now here is your assignment. How would you arrange these adjectives in the spaces provided between and building? You have 3 minutes to finish. It's okay if you discuss it with the next person sitting by you. Okay, get ready to stop work.